Hey guys, this is Gerard,
This is Frank.
This is Ray.
This is Mikey.
and we're My Chemical Romance, and we're here to talk about our new album, The Black Parade. The end was basically this song where I think when we butted that up against Dead, I think we realized we were making a really theatrical record that was also going to be very big. We wanted something, I think, we wanted the end to feel a little bit like the beginning of The Wall. There's a song called In the Flesh, ? Because it reprises later in the record. But we wanted it to feel very much like that kind of beginning, like that you were about to get taken on a journey. And I think that's why that that song is so big. And it tells a story right away. I think it just kind of pulls you in to this story. So.
Yeah, that's like you said, that song definitely set the tone of the record, of the entire record. We had written it in New York at SIR Studios, and as soon as all the drums and all the guitars kicked in really loud from that first acoustic guitar that starts, like we knew that we were onto something big.
I'll serve it in drag. You've got front row seats to the penitence bar. When I grow up, I want to be living.
Dead was written probably right around that time too.
Yeah, that was written on
It's one of the
14.
older songs that were written, and it's the first one that it started out as this kind of scathing social commentary, and then ended up being the song that very much fitted the story. I mean, you also notice on Dead, it's got a little bit of a 90s Britpop feel to it, which is kind of intentional. It was inspired by
Mr. Blue Sky.
Mr. Blue Sky by Electric Light Orchestra, but there's definitely some moments of Blur in there and Pulp a little bit. It's definitely got kind of a Britpop vibe, which, something that I've wanted in some form to appear in the music at one point in our career. So it's cool to have that in there. And, it fits really great after the end because it launches you right into this story.
It definitely has that Britpop like bouncy feel.
Yeah, the bounce, the meter of the song.
I think then going out of the chorus and into the B section, there was definitely a section we wrote, and it was like almost like a walking bass line kind of thing when it was originally written, and then we kind of talked about what we could put in there to make it, just go into a different world at that point, because Gerard started singing in different character voices and things like that. And I think early on I was the one who was like, I really want tuba.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure why.
I think Frank had heard horns, and I think it's because the section almost reminded us of Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
And we wanted to take it there right away on the record. We wanted to take it into this kind of Sgt. Pepper's realm because, there was really three major influences for the record, and aside from our lives and using metaphors to describe them, it was Sgt. Pepper's, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and Queen's Night at the Opera. Those are the three main records that inspired this album directly, and so it was good to have a nice little injection of Sgt. Pepper's right away. I pictured this kind of hospital in Dead, and I pictured this doctor talking to this patient in this doctor voice, and I think that comes across in that. And so there's all these like ironic horns and these slams on the piano that are happening when they're talking about a problem with this guy's heart, and so.
What I love most about Dead is that huge ending, because it's like a tribute to all the bands that we all love, like the Beatles, Oasis, Blur. Like, it's just this great, it kind of like refrains the song, and it's like, I don't know, it's just a moving part.
It's a really celebratory ending. It's kind of this la la la
Yeah.
sing along, and the melody just kind of struck us when Gerard came up with it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was great when we first played it in the studio. Like, that was one of the most fun sections because it was like really kind of like the first time where me, Gerard, and Frank actually sang together, and it just sounded so huge. All of us
Pretty
singing
tight.
the laws together, and
Yeah.
it was just really fun. It was just like this huge gang vocal to finish off the song, and it's just a great way to finish it.
Well, Sharpest, I think, it started out as a vocal melody that Gerard was kicking around for a little while, and normally we can, from knowing G, like we all know when there's something that he's real psyched about and like really wants to get on real quick, because like someone will have a guitar at that moment and like it'll turn into a song. But it was one of those melodies that was like, let's work on it a little bit, and then we kind of just went on to other things. And then the more we got into recording, we were actually tracking at that point. G and Toro went in the other room, and I think he kind of just something about that melody keep coming back, and he was like, let's just try this.
Yeah, it was one of those things that melody was like, it was almost kind of this one. I think me and Ray had test driven it a little bit at the Paramore, but I don't think everybody was that psyched on it. And then I was like saying to myself, you know what, I just don't think it's finished yet. And I still believed in the verse, but that's all it was really there. It didn't have a powerful chorus or anything. So, but then I just, something about it, it was relentlessly in my head. So I remember one night, Ray had loaned me his guitar, and I just sat down. It was one of the biggest moments of inspiration for me during the record. It was one of those cases where I just sat down with a guitar and a bunch of sheets of paper and literally try to write this whole song from start to finish with bridges and everything in it. And it was pretty crazy. The lyrics came immediately, and they were very inspired. And so I would just play it on an acoustic guitar and sing it. And actually, that version to me has a lot of charm to it too. Like, it sounds almost like a New Order song when you play it on acoustic guitar and just sing it. It has a lot of charm to it. But so then the objective was then to take that song that was almost just acoustic and then just throw everything on it, electronics, everything, and then strip away the elements to the point where it felt like it was a rock band again. So it did start with a lot more electronics than real instruments. It was like a really intense tracking session because it lasted 3 days, and Rob Cavallo got crazed about the song, and we were all just working really feverishly for 3 days and didn't stop once that song came about.
Yeah.
So
I just remember that night we were watching TV or something,
yeah,
and he points in the air, goes in the other room with the guitar, and comes out with the chorus. And I was just like,
Time for the show, you're the one that I need, I'm the one that you loathe. You can watch me corrode like a beast in repose, cause I love all the poison away with the boys in the band. I've really been on a bender and it shows, so why don't you blow me? Work your spin for the street, girl. Give me a shot to remember, and you can take all the pain away from me. You can say I won't surrender. The sharpest lights I pretend me as to me.
We wrote for a while
Right.
before even starting in New York. We wrote while on tour. I think we started in Warped Tour in the summer. We put a little mini makeshift studio in the back of our bus, and we wrote constantly trying to get into the mindset of writing before we actually took some time to sit down and do the record. But I think the oldest song on this record is actually the first single, "Welcome to the Black Parade," because it went through so many different forms before it even got to that point. We actually wrote, I guess, the idea for it before the first record ever came out. And then it didn't get finished for the first record, and we kind of abandoned it. And then before we wrote Three Cheers, we brought it back, trying to see if it would work, and we just had so many other things that we wanted to work on that it didn't get finished. And then when this record finally, we sat down to write this record, we're like, oh, well, remember that song? And it started out really slow, and then we sped it up, and then we recorded it, and we were happy with it, and then we listened to it, and we're like, this could be better. So then, but the whole process, I guess, took 3 years for that song.
this song is like a real true testament to the band, how it's grown. It's a very prime example of the risks we took on the record. It encapsulates really the themes of the record, a lot of what we're trying to say, which is to be very direct to our audience and any audience we might get, is to say, the last record was about aggression and maybe violence and dealing with things in an angst way, whereas this record, we wanted people to get over that and stop being upset and really carry on through anything bad that happened. And it's also the point in the record where this patient meets up with this Black Parade, and it takes him on this journey. And so, as far as a song, it was like the biggest, hardest song we'd ever had to create together. It has 167 tracks.
Which is it's like I think a world record.
It's got a marching band. It's got multiple snare sections. It has horns. This section we referred to as the orphan section which is these kind of gang vocals that come in during the bridge, which we really try to shoot for it sounding like Little Orphan Annie.
It does kind of encompass what the whole record is about. This
Yeah.
track for sure.
So I think it's a really good way to, as a first single, I guess, to really give you a little bit of a scope as to what the rest of the record will bring. So
Yeah, the weird part about this song is that when we originally started writing it, the code name for it was "The Five of Us Are Dying,"
Ooh, which I hated.
which
Right.
it was
hate
named,
that name.
it was
Ray's really
codenamed.
superstitious.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, I'm really superstitious, and I remember
I'll
this
blame
was the last song that we well, in its previous form we had tracked it, and we were getting on a plane to go to, I think, Europe.
England, yeah.
Yeah, we were going to England, and
I
I
remember this.
didn't want to get on the plane. I
Yeah.
was freaking out
That was a bad
because it
conversation.
just so happened that this song was the last one that we tracked. The Five of Us Are Dying, and then get on a plane and go play a show. Sure, have fun.
Right.
And I was just I almost didn't get on the plane.
I Don't Love You is the song that follows Black Parade, and that's, I think, was our first shot at really kind of writing something sort of like a ballad,
Yeah,
something
definitely.
more relaxed, and I don't know, for me, for some reason I keep thinking that it's something that Otis Redding might sing the shit out of.
Yeah,
I'm really
that's why
hoping
I
for that.
try to riff on right before that second chorus, just like him. So, it's also another song that was kind of written early on, as well. And,
Yeah, that was written on tour too.
I think we sound checked it on the Green Day tour while they were all. I think Green Day was playing wiffle ball.
Yep,
And
that's
we,
true.
we
Yeah, that's
sound
right.
checked it, and it was pretty powerful even back then. So, it's a song that's just very direct, and we saw this song as the patient looking back at his life in a moment where he made some mistakes. So that's really kind of what this one's about.
Yeah. Musically, too, instrumentation wise, it's very inspired by Creedence Clearwater, Who'll Stop the Rain. There's B3 organ in it, which just kind of fills out the sound real nice. But it's kind of interesting because this song, compared to Black Parade, feels much smaller. But I think that actually works on the record because Black Parade feels so big, and you kind of need I Don't Love You is kind of very easygoing and a little breathe, has more room to breathe, and I think it's kind of nice that it follows that.
House of Wolves was written in the Paramore house at a dark time in the writing process. I think we were kind of all felt a little spent by just things that were going on, personal issues, and just we really put a lot into writing a lot of those songs, up until that point. And I think we were kind of just at a point where it was like, all right, we need some time to breathe. And I remember kind of just wanting to play at that point for some reason, and I picked up Rob Cavallo's really big, red, clunky
I
acoustic
love that guitar. I love it.
And I tried to write a song really hard, but for me, when I say I'm going to sit down and write a song is when nothing comes out. So I sat there and kind of just stared at the wall for about an hour, and then I just start playing stuff that I thought my dad would like. And that kind of turned into the basis of House of Wolves.
Yeah. I remember him playing this thing, and I walked in, and it almost reminded me of a really early Smith song. The way he was strumming the verses were, it was kind of when the Smiths would try to do these rockabilly songs. There's one in particular. The name escapes me, but initially the chords were extremely catchy, and so, but naturally, like the vocal melody that went along with it was very Morrissey-like, and then we kind of just kept building on it from there. And we ended up with all these really great sections we'd always wanted to use in songs, like this almost like pseudo Detroit Rock City section, and then this middle section, which is just this ripping kind of, I don't even know how rhythm and blues, like with stops and like shouts, and it's just really crazy. So
It's like if Motorhead and the Stray Cats were
Yeah,
hanging
a
out in
little
a
bit.
club,
Yeah, that's a good-
playing the jukebox, that song
They were
would
just
come
hanging
out.
knocking each other's teeth out.
Yeah.
That's what this song would be. It's my
Yeah.
favorite.
Oh, yeah.
The Looney Tunes thing.
Yeah. It's totally, and it's weird too because I remember when Gerard was writing the lyrics and just the music kind of lent itself to this, like the song is kind of about sin and hell. And when I remember when hearing it, I pictured like fire and kind of brimstone. I also like the way the song starts. It's kind of like a tom drum thing, something that you could hear like in a jazz club. And I imagined maybe the patient like walking into this like club where there's just like fire and brimstone. And I remembered back to Looney Tunes cartoons. I can't remember the specific one, but there's this one where the character gets like knocked out and he descends into hell.
I
And
think he actually dies.
yeah, I can't
I
remember
know of the
exactly what it
There's
is. Yeah.
a wolf character who dies.
Right, he dies and he goes into hell, and it's this jazz club where this jazz band is playing, and it's wolves are playing the music, and it's like there's fire everywhere, and there's horns here and horns there.
We should mention too, real quick, that the record is the tightest concept record we've ever done. It's based off the very simple theory of when you die. I'd always like to believe that death comes for you however you want subconsciously, and maybe it's like a manifestation of a strong memory. So for this character, the patient who's dying tragically young in his 30s in a hospital, his strongest memory is of his father taking him to see this parade in the big city when he was a little boy. So that's why death comes for him in the form of this black parade. So when it does finally get to him, he kind of goes on this odyssey of looking back at his life, looking at other people's lives. And this is the one moment on the record, House of Wolves, where I felt that he was maybe getting very afraid that he was going to hell. Like he wasn't sure where he was going, but he's pretty sure that he'd be going to hell. Or maybe he walks into a seedy bar in the afterlife and he's reminded of the wages of sin. That's what I kind of pictured for the song.
And I said ashes to ashes, we all fall down. I wanna hear you sing the praise. I said ashes to ashes, we all fall down. We got innocence for days. Well, I think I'm on a burning hell. Everybody burn a house right down and say what I wanna say. Tell me I'm not nature. Take this to my grave. Tell me I'm a bad man. Gag me like a stray.
Cancer is arguably a collective favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite song
Yeah.
by far. I think this is my favorite song that actually I've ever heard. Not even just the songs that we've done. I mean, it's by far the favorite that we've ever done, but I think it's probably my favorite song of all time.
I think it's the most emotionally impactful song we've ever written. I think we had gotten to a point as songwriters where it's so terrifyingly honest and in your face that it needs to be, but it garners an immediate response from people. People can't help but listen to the song. They can't help but shut up when it's playing, and that's part of the idea. That cancer affects 1 in every 3 people, and it's something that's affected all of us, and something we take very seriously. And that's kind of why the title had to be so brutally honest. I think people may argue that the title's heavy-handed or that it's trying to get a reaction out of people, and the only reaction it's trying to get out of people is to face the honesty of it. And I feel that the song's actually very empowering. It was, I don't know if it was difficult to write so much as difficult to perform a little bit, but it was a lot of those takes are really just one of the first 3 takes. It was Rob on piano. I was doing vocals live with him. And it was one of the first 3 takes, and it was, Rob always had this saying that your initial takes are the ones you want because that's your first, most honest response. And we then laid the drums over because I felt that in the second verse, when those drums come in, it gives you a sense of hope, which the song really needed. It needed a sense of urgency, of hope, empowerment that I think is in there. And So I think the song was very successful in that regard. It's the most pure form of song.
Yeah, it's hard for me to even really listen to it without getting emotional. It's just one of those songs that tugs on whatever that thing inside of you is, and you're stuck with the honesty and the beauty and the horrificness of what he's saying, and I think it's something that, in a good way or a bad way, it strikes home with everyone that hears it.
Yeah, I think, like I said before too, I think people could argue about the song all they want, but I think some of the greatest songs ever written have been the ones that people argue about, or the ones that people say, well, they didn't have to go that far, and I think we did have to go that far with this song, and I think that's why I'm so proud of everybody in the band for having the courage to put this kind of song on the record.
'Cause the hardest part of this is leaving you. Now turn away, 'cause I'm awful just to see. 'Cause
I'll start off with Mom, and then we can all tell our own stories about
Yeah,
Mama.
I think we all have stories about Mama.
We were in this arena in Chicago. I was very almost defeated. We'd been touring a long time. And I was backstage, and I just got this phrase in my head, Mama, we all go to hell. Then I just heard this kind of bouncy, Doors-like, almost Alabama song riff in my head with it, and I was like, this would be cool. So I asked Ray to come backstage, and he'd played this kind of boom, bit, and it's exactly how I described it and what I wanted, and then it started to come together. So I think immediately we brought it to sound check, and we said, hey, guys, we got something new. Let's check it out. And then, and then everybody it just immediately was like, all right, we're on to something new. So when we finally got a chance to look at Mama again, we were in New York, and we dug her up kind of, and we said, all right, let's work on Mama. And we knew it was going to be a procedure, So we played Mama, and then we all just let the song tell us what it wanted to be. And we worked on it accordingly. And but we knew once we had almost completed that song that a new creative bar had been raised for ourselves, and that's when a lot of songs started to get cut. That's when we threw out a lot of songs that were just these simple punk songs, because they weren't going to make it anymore. And we knew Mama fit in very much with the story and this theatricality that we wanted to capture and the grandness. And it's a song that evolved. It was one of the longest songs next to Welcome to Black Parade to track, because so many layers, so many instruments,
They just need to be
glockenspiels.
exactly right.
Yeah, everything had to be perfect. Liza Minnelli, who was phenomenal, worked on the track with us and sang this one line that I really wanted, this voice that carried a lot of sorrow and strength, and carried with it a tradition. And the song needed it, because the song was kind of cabaret. The song was has this big chorale ending. It was almost Broadway, and it needed her, and it needed all the elements in the end. So I know everybody has a story about this song.
It's one of those songs where you hear like the first couple of bars of it. I remember when Ray and Gerard were kind of working on it. It was like one of those things where sometimes they'll come up with something and it's like, all right, this is gonna be a hard one to write to and write with and find an ending, But this one just kind of just kept going, and it was like, I have all these ideas, all these melodies that I want to, I think should poke their heads at this point and that point, and maybe it should just go downhill here and then come back up with this different thing. And it was one of those songs that just stayed in your head constantly, and you'd stay up at night thinking about. And when we finally got the chance to work on it in New York, it really took off running, I think. It was one of those things where we were like, all right, should we pull back the reins on it? Should we let Mama be, this entity and go off? What should we do? And I think we made the right decision and just let it grow into its own thing. As far as stories go, I think this is the most, theatrical, visual song that tells a story that we've ever done. And man, it's one of my favorites on the record. I just think I'm just so happy and proud that we didn't pull back reins on it.
It's like one of those magical moments where you're like, oh, it's all these crazy sections, but it doesn't feel like we were trying to pull the rug out from people. So.
Exactly. Yeah, that was one of the concerns too. Was like, all right, we get it. It doesn't confuse us, anybody else that just listens to it that hasn't lived it yet, are they gonna get confused? And
Right.
that's the cool thing, that nobody has said that to me yet. I was
Right,
like, oh, this
yeah.
is really confusing.
I think, people who, people on first listen of that song really do get taken for the ride with it, and there's never, you just really, really lose yourself, like right off the bat, just from the way the first lines of the lyrics are delivered, like you get taken into the trenches, and you're there with this guy who's scared as hell to be where he is right now, and you're there with him through the whole story. And in that regard, I think it is one of the most successful things that we've done because of that. Because, I mean, you're there, you picture what's going on as he's telling the story. It's pretty great.
We all go to hell. Mama, we all go to hell. I'm writing this letter and wishing you well. Mama, we all go to hell. Oh, well, now, Mama, we're all gonna die. Mama, we're all gonna die. Stop asking me questions. I'd hate to see you cry. Mama, we're all gonna die when we go to Plymouth.
We should mention that Sleep was inspired by
Yeah,
a Toto song off the Dune soundtrack. That it's actually, to me, one of the most powerful pieces of music I ever heard. I think it's called Final Dream. It's about 1 minute and 10 seconds long. It's one of the most emotionally moving pieces of music ever.
I'll never forget the night that you guys were like, yo, we gotta write a song that has this feel to it. And I remember coming down one night, I was like, you guys are just up all night watching nerd movies.
Yeah.
That's exactly what came out of my mouth. And the next day it was like, bang, nerd movie come to life.
It just inspired a little bit of the music. But the song was actually inspired by these nightmares that I used to have at the Paramore, which were way worse than nightmares, actually, and way worse than night tremors. It was just like these things where it felt like my heart was stopping. It felt like I was being choked. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't sleeping. I was sleeping like a half hour a night.
What I think it's so amazing is, I've always wanted us to write, big guitar rock kind of, driving, something that reminds me of, the early, mid-'90s. And that's exactly what this song reminds me of. And while they're playing it, you could just, imagine, those bands, the bands that you grew up,
Yeah,
they were
Pumpkins,
heroes. Yeah,
for sure.
Smashing Pumpkins.
It like Frank had mentioned earlier, it was during a very dark period when we were writing this record, and there were some emotional problems, and it was the culmination of every stress and fear I had, just wrapped into one song, and it's very much about fear and really just a desire for peace, and musically, I think it's the most epic thing we've ever captured. Rob devised 2 new guitar tones for this song. One is called Black Fire, the other is called Nemesis. Nemesis, which is the greatest guitar tone to me ever. It's so punishing and large.
As soon as he developed it too, I think Ray hit a chord and one of the walls just fell down.
I think so, seriously. There was some kind of makeshift wall we were using to close in some sound. I think Nemesis knocked it over.
Crumbled
So
under the foot of Nemesis.
Some say now suffer all the children and walk away a savior or a madman and polluted from gutter institutions. Don't you breathe on me, undeserving of your sympathy, 'cause there ain't no way that I'm sorry for what I did. When I'm through it all, how could you cry?
Teenagers. Teenagers is it's the craziest song on the record. It's one of the craziest songs. It was the source of heated debates many a night. I was riding the train into rehearsal at SIR in New York, and I had found that I'd become very paranoid and very much out of touch with living a normal life. And every time school let out, I get very scared, and I didn't know why. And everything made me nervous. I was always on my toes because I was afraid of what kind of attention I would draw to myself because even before the band, I would always attract negative attention because I'd always wear black or something. But since being in the band, it got a lot worse. And so I always got nervous on subways, and I had to ride them every day from Queens into practice. But, you know, one day on the train, I just wrote these lyrics and this melody in my head, and then we got to practice, and I showed it to everybody. And I think most of the people thought
If not all of them.
If not all of them thought I was absolutely crazy.
That's what sold me on the song.
And that's initially what sold. Yeah, Ray was just all about it right away because of that. Like, he was like, this is, what'd you say?
I think I might have actually used the word genius.
Yeah,
I may have said genius.
All right, through my eyes, what happened was I walked in a little late.
Through a
to
sane
practice
person's
that day.
eyes, this is what happened.
And I hear them like kind of jamming on this like T-Rex vibe kind of thing, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be funny. So I sat down and we just started all playing it. It was like, and I just I was laughing and playing, and it didn't change from that first day. And the song ended and it was like, all right, so what was that? Right? And they were like, oh, what do you think? And I was like, I thought you guys were joking around.
Right.
And then like everybody that would come in the studio after that, Gerard was like, we gotta play them teenagers, and I was like, yo, you're serious?
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where like I think that everything changes once you really listen to what's being said, and you really have to really pay attention to what Gerard's talking about and what he's singing about, and then it ties everything in, and it really is a very serious song, and I think it's really important to for this band and for the record.
We needed the lyrics to really drive the point home we were trying to say. I mean, it's a very important song because it talks about how teenagers are engendered to violence and how they're watched over and how they're over-medicated and how they're a group of people that, they feel that a lot of them are made to feel like they can only solve their problems with violence. A lot of them are made to feel invisible. And this is a song that addresses a lot of issues about kids lashing out against other kids, lashing out against society, and it worked. It was one of those things it's like, oh, it's almost crazy enough to work, and it does. So we're all really proud of this one. I think more so than almost as much as Cancer, I feel that this song really shows how much courage that everybody had involved in the project to want to say this in this type of way on the record.
As long as someone will bleed, so dark in your clothes, I'll strike a violent pose. Maybe it'll leave you alone, but not me. The boys and girls in the clique, the awful names at the stick. You're never gonna fit in much, kid. But if you're troubled and hurt, what you got under your shirt will make them pay for the things that they did. They said out, teenagers scared the living shit.
Disenchanted was written when we were supposed to be practicing for our last headlining tour.
Yep.
To the US, and we hadn't really written in a really long time because we were just constantly on tour and working and really busy and just didn't have the time to sit down and play together. And it was one of those itches that needed to be scratched or at least maybe shot in the face. So we kind of just all got together and we were like, all right, the songs that we're gonna play. Let's just play something else. And we started to write a song, and it became Disenchanted, but in a different form. And we kind of incorporated it into the set for the headlining tour. And I think by the end of the tour, we were kind of like, oh, this is, it's a good song, but we have other stuff we really want to write on, and we kind of just tossed it aside. And remember in the Paramore, Mikey was like, "Oh, we're gonna play Disenchanted." We were like, "Oh man, no!"
Right, and the thing, like at that point too, we probably had like 18 or 19 songs, and it was just like to us, except for Mikey, to us it was just like another song, and it didn't have that, it didn't have anything special about it. And I remember, he would whisper while you were sleeping, "Disenchanted," get you to think about it the next day.
Mikey always believed in this song, and I'm glad he did because he helped us pull together in the end.
Like I remember when Gerard first came up with the initial vocal melody, we were all we were practicing for the headlining tour, and he was just freestyling on the microphone. And then the song just wrote like so fluid.
It really did write itself. It's so much that we had to reevaluate it and rewrite it. It was one of those things that you got so inspired so quickly, it wrote itself a little too quickly.
Too fast,
yeah. And then we had to kind of be like, no, we need to make a little more structure. It needs to say a lot more than simply the chorus melody over and over again, and which is the way we played it on the headlining tour, but it needed to say a lot more. So we restructured it in such a way that I think it became a way more effective song, and then the first time we heard it tracked, we were blown away.
Yeah.
And we were so happy that, you know, Mikey had encouraged us to keep pressing on with the song.
Yeah, I listened to it like 30 times when it was done tracked. I like grabbed the headphones.
Yeah,
And
any
I,
chance Mikey could get to
I was
listen
like,
to it.
let me listen to Disenchanted, please.
Too hard, it would sting. Yeah, yeah. If I'm so wrong, how can you listen all night long? How will it matter after I'm gone? Because you never learn a goddamn thing. It's just the same song with nothing to say about a lifelong wait for a hospital stay.
Famous Last Words is it's the last track on the record, and it's my favorite track. It kind of, what I love about it so much is that it really sums up what the whole record is about. Really the message that we're trying to convey through the story is for people to, live every day like it's their last and live it to the fullest and really enjoy life. The song has, for me, the most inspiring chorus. The lyrics are, they make me want to wake up in the morning and like have a great day. That's the best way to describe this song. And that it's actually really heavy and really powerful as well. Like it's one of the it's pretty interesting because it's like a more of a moderate tempo song for us. Most of our songs are either slower tempo or like Mach speed, and this one kind of falls in the middle, and it becomes way heavier because of that. It's like I said, it's just one of my favorite tracks. It's a great listen.
Yeah, it's one of the most emotionally powerful songs on the record. It's an extremely difficult subject to personally talk about. It's one of those things that's just very hard to put into words. It's almost like that kind of song where you just have to hit play for somebody, and maybe they'll understand you by the end of it. It's heavy. Every time that song comes on, it's so emotionally heavy. I just kind of like get taken aback, and I'm like, oh man, this song. And but I think it's the most powerful choruses we had ever written together, and it hits you in the stomach like a hammer. And I know it's Brian, our manager's favorite song that we've written, and it's special to everybody in the band in different ways. It's a great way to end a record. It's a nice sentiment. The best part about this album is that we got to say a lot of things to our fans that before we could only say to them in live performances in between songs. And the great thing about this record is we got to say it in a song. And this is one of those songs that says it very directly in the song. And I think it's really very much about saying, I can do this alone sometimes. I really don't, I can get through this. I just have to be strong and I'll get through this. I can make it. I want to live. Stay, I'll be forgiven. Nothing you can say can stop me going home.